Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever felt like time isn't just ticking away, but almost flowing around you? Because for decades, some really, really out there ideas have been bubbling up in science, hinting that time might be way, way weirder than we think.
Yeah, like fundamentally different.
We're talking about experiments that make your eyebrows just shoot up, you know?
Yeah.
And theories that sound like they were beamed in from, I don't know, a sci-fi convention.
What's fascinating here is this persistent itch, isn't it? To scratch beyond the surface of what we consider like settled science. Our standard physics treats time like a stage.
Right, just the background.
Exactly. Events happen on it, but it doesn't really do anything. But the stuff we're looking at today suggests time might be an active player, almost a character in the cosmic story.
Exactly. And this deep dive is throwing us headfirst into the extraordinary world of Nikolai Kozyrev. He was a 20th century astronomer from Russia whose ideas about time, consciousness, the universe, they're, no exaggeration, mind melters.
Yeah, absolutely.
This isn't about rehashing the usual stuff. This is about exploring a perspective that could, like, flip our understanding of reality completely on its head.
And for you, the curious mind tuning in, we know you want the juicy bits.
Definitely.
So our mission, basically, is to pull out the most crucial pieces of Kozyrev's work and the research it sparked, connecting these seemingly random dots into a picture that's both clear and hopefully makes you go, whoa.
Yeah, hopefully a big whoa. We've waded through scientific papers, discussions of experiments that sound like they came from a parallel universe, honestly, and even some ideas that dance right on the edge of metaphysics.
It's quite a mix.
Think of us as your friendly explorers in this intellectual jungle. But before we dive in, dear listeners, please like, subscribe, and share to join our community exploring the cutting edge of knowledge. So with a figure as fascinating and, well, unconventional as Nikolai Kozyrev, where do we even begin?
Well, to get a handle on his ideas, it kind of helps to know a bit about the man himself. Nikolai Alexandrovich Kozyrev was born in St. Petersburg, Leningrad then, back in 1908. And he wasn't some amateur stargazer, you know. His early career was firmly planted in the respectable field of astronomy.
Right, right. And he wasn't just any astronomer poking at telescopes, was he? There's that incredible story in 1958 about the moon.
Precisely. Using a spectrograph at the Crimean Astrophysical Observatory, Kozyrev observed what looked like volcanic activity inside the Alphonsus crater.
On the moon.
On the moon. This was a huge deal, the first solid evidence that the moon might still be geologically active. So it's crucial to remember he had this, established scientific reputation.
Okay, so he wasn't some wild-eyed theorist straight off the bat. He had serious scientific chops.
Yeah.
But then things took a turn for the unusual.
They certainly did. In 1960, the Soviet Academy of Sciences actually formed a special commission, specifically to investigate Kozyrev's theories and experiments.
Oh, commission, what?
Yeah, this wasn't just a casual chat. It was a formal, in-depth inquiry covering his theoretical framework, his experimental methods, even his work on why planets might be a little lopsided, their asymmetry. This shows that even within the more traditional scientific circles, his ideas were initially taken seriously, even if they were starting to push the boundaries.
Okay, so what were these mind-bending ideas that got everyone talking?
Yeah.
What was the core of his challenge to how we normally think about time?
Kozyrev started developing this concept of active time instead of just being a passive dimension where events play out.
Like that stage you mentioned.
Exactly. He suggested that time itself has inherent properties, a kind of agency. One key part of this was the idea that time could actively work against things falling into disarray, what scientists call entropy.
Okay, so fighting against chaos.
Sort of, yeah. And that it played a vital role in keeping biological systems organized and complex.
So almost like time has a built-in tendency towards order. That's a massive perspective shift.
It is. He went on to theorize that the flow and even the density of time could act like a kind of invisible network connecting different parts of the universe.
An invisible network.
This, he thought, might explain how biological things that are far apart or completely isolated could still somehow influence each other. Imagine time as this universal, interconnected web.
Now it's starting to feel less like a physics lesson and more like we're diving into something deeper. How did he even try to explain these concepts? Like mathematically or?
Well, he developed something he called causal mechanics. This was his attempt to describe how this flow of time works as a fundamental substance.
A substance?
Yeah, a substance that can move through the universe without physically pushing things around in the traditional sense, without transferring momentum. And even more surprisingly, he proposed that this flow could potentially travel faster than the speed of light.
Whoa, okay, faster than light. That's practically science fiction. It messes with our whole understanding of cause and effect, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And within this framework, Kozyrev suggested that this time flow isn't uniform. He thought that the density of time would be thinner around a cause, the thing that makes something else happen,
Right.
and denser around an effect, the result. And what's really wild is that he claimed this difference in time density could still be detected, even if you put something solid in between, like a thick wall or a metal container. Shielding didn't stop it.
So a cause leaves a kind of time ripple, like a wake, and an effect sits in a sort of time thicket. How on earth do you even begin to test something like that?
This is where his really controversial experiments come in. He claimed that simple chemical reactions like burning sugar could have a measurable effect on a gyroscope pendulum that was some distance away.
Burning sugar. Wiggling a pendulum.
Yeah, and that this happened without any known physical forces carrying the influence. He put it down to changes in the time density created by the chemical reaction.
Burning sugar. Affecting a pendulum from across the room.
Yeah.
Using the power of time density. It sounds less like a scientific experiment and more like, I don't know, a stage magician's trick.
Well, the implications, if true, would be huge, and it gets even more peculiar. Kozyrev also explored whether our thoughts could affect this time density. He apparently found that when he deliberately focused on emotional or poetic thoughts during his experiments, his instruments showed a bigger reaction than when he was concentrating on, say, logical, mathematical calculations.
Get out. So our inner feelings, our mental world, could be literally bending time around us. That's a massive claim.
It is a really massive claim. And while these findings haven't been consistently replicated by mainstream science, they were a key part of Kozyrev's work. And they still intrigue people who are looking beyond conventional physics and into the nature of consciousness.
Which kind of brings us to the rather mysterious devices known as Kozyrev Mirrors, right?
Exactly. Yes, the legendary mirrors. You often see pictures of these spirally, almost psychedelic-looking contraptions.
Yeah, what were they actually supposed to do?
Well, the term Kozyrev mirror actually became more widely used after Kozyrev passed away. Possibly thanks to the work of Vladimir Kaznechev. While Kozyrev himself did use mirrors in some of his experiments, the specific spirally shaped aluminum structures we often picture are more of a later invention based on his concepts.
Gotcha. So what's the general idea behind them?
The general idea is that they can somehow interact with this flow of time.
Like trapping it? Focusing it like a time laser?
Maybe more like focusing it. The thinking is that their unique shape and the reflective properties of aluminum might amplify subtle energy fields and concentrate vibrational frequencies that are somehow linked to this temporal flow.
Okay, amplifying subtle energies, concentrating frequencies. And what were these souped-up energies and frequencies supposed to do? What was the point of sitting inside one of these things?
Well, one area of exploration has been using them to help people reach deeper states of meditation and altered consciousness.
Okay.
The enclosed space of a Kozyrev mirror, it's suggested, might create an environment that encourages introspection and experiences beyond our normal awareness.
So like a sensory deprivation tank, but with a potential time-twisting bonus. Is that fair?
In a way, yeah, you could think of it like that. But beyond just personal experiences, there have been claims of using these mirrors to explore things like remote viewing, clairvoyance, and telepathy.
Whoa.
What we might broadly call psychic abilities. The idea is that by somehow influencing the time flow, these subtle abilities might be enhanced or become easier to access.
Okay, now we're really heading into areas where mainstream science gets a little twitchy. What's the rationale behind these connections between time, these special mirrors, and psychic phenomena?
The basic idea is that our perception of time and our conscious awareness are deeply connected to the fundamental structure of the universe, possibly through this time flow that Kozyrev proposed.
Right.
So by altering this flow or how we interact with it, the mirrors might change how we perceive reality and how we can access information beyond our usual senses.
And there's also the suggestion that the aluminum metal itself isn't just reflecting light in these mirrors, right? Something more.
That's right. According to some interpretations of Kozyrev's work, aluminum is thought to reflect not just electromagnetic radiation like light, but also this time flow. So the mirrors could potentially shield people from certain aspects of time or change their personal experience of how time passes.
And this wasn't just all theory and weird-looking devices, was it? People actually did experiments with these mirrors.
Yes.
In specific places.
Yes, yes. There's a particularly interesting set of experiments that took place in some very remote polar settlements, specifically in Dixon, which is way up north at around 73 degrees latitude.
Okay, why there?
This location is significant because, according to Kozyrev's calculations, it should have a theoretically zero value for the forces of time motion caused by the Earth's rotation.
So a place where the influence of time, at least in one specific way related to Earth's spin, might be at its weakest. That's a pretty strategic spot to try these things out.
Exactly. Researchers there studied how people perceive time both inside and outside Kozyrev mirrors in this unique environment.
What did they find?
Interestingly, they reportedly found that changes in how people felt time passing were more noticeable in individuals who had experienced high levels of solar activity while they were still in the womb.
Wait, what? That is a bizarre link. Solar flares affecting our internal clock decades later, and that effect being amplified by a Kozyrev mirror in a place where time's rotational influence is supposedly minimal.
Yeah.
That sounds like a cosmic riddle wrapped in an aluminum spiral.
It really does. And these experiments added more fuel to the fire of speculation about how connected celestial events, our planet's environment, biological development, and our fundamental experience of time might be, which also loops back to Kozyrev's earlier experiments with chemical reactions acting at a distance.
The burning sugar and the mysteriously wiggling pendulum, right? How do those experiments connect to these ideas about consciousness and interactions across vast distances?
Well, some people discussing Kozyrev's work explicitly suggested that what he observed could be seen as a form of psychokinesis, or PK, mind over matter.
Because there was no known force.
Exactly, because these chemical events seem to influence the gyroscope without any known physical force involved.
And Kozyrev himself attributed it to shifts in time density, if I remember correctly.
Precisely. And when he was asked point blank if thought itself could alter this time density, he apparently said yes.
Wow.
He even noted, as we mentioned, that emotional or poetic thoughts seemed to have a stronger effect on his instruments than purely logical mathematical thinking.
So that's a direct link, in his view anyway, between our inner mental states, the nature of time, and the ability to influence things remotely.
According to his interpretation, yes. It's a perspective that completely blurs the lines between what we think of as the physical world and our internal mental landscape.
It really does. And then there were experiments involving trying to communicate across distances in unconventional ways, weren't there? Like sending images or something.
Yes, there are accounts of what were called distant image-bearing communication experiments. These were apparently conducted using something referred to as Kozyrev's plant, likely some kind of apparatus based on his ideas in those same remote polar regions.
Okay.
These experiments involved attempts to send images or information over significant distances without using any of the standard methods we know, like radio waves or anything like that.
And what happened in these experiments? Did people in the Arctic start seeing random pictures popping into their heads?
Some accounts describe a correlation between groups of people performing simultaneous actions at a distance and the appearance of unusual phenomena.
Like what kind of phenomena?
For example, there were reports of the Earth's informational field, whatever that precisely means, becoming unstable at the same time as these experiments.
Unstable informational field. Oh.
And this was possibly linked to strange light formations in the polar skies, like a disk with a glowing tail, and significant disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field.
So a bunch of people thinking about something at the same time could wobble the planet's magnetic field and create something that looks like a UFO? That's a pretty out there claim.
It is. And the weirdness doesn't end there. There are anecdotal stories from people who spent time in what was referred to as Kozyrev spacing.
Which probably means inside the mirrors or similar setups.
Likely, yes. And they reported a whole range of bizarre experiences. These included seeing things like flying saucers, glowing yellow orbs of light, feeling waves of pressure, and experiencing symbolic visions.
It sounds like stepping into a completely different reality, almost like a portal.
That's how some described it, indeed. There were also some very unusual experiments involving twins during a solar eclipse.
Twins end in eclipse. Okay, this sounds interesting.
The fascinating finding here was what they called a forestalling reception of transmitted images by one twin.
Forestalling reception, meaning?
Meaning that one twin seemed to perceive the information up to 15 minutes before it was actually sent to the other twin.
Get out. before it was sent.
That's the claim, suggesting some kind of non-local connection that bypassed our usual understanding of time.
Twins seemingly reading each other's minds across time during an eclipse. That's deeply strange, and it really challenges how we think information travels.
Exactly. And the theme of our minds influencing the physical world pops up again in experiments involving remotely influencing random number generators. You know, those machines that are supposed to produce pure randomness.
Right, RNGs. What about them?
Researchers apparently found that when someone focused their mental and emotional energy within a hypomagnetic chamber, that's a space shielded from the Earth's magnetic field.
Okay, shielded from magnetism.
It correlated with more erratic behavior, more fluctuations, in a random number generator located far away.
So, shielding someone from the Earth's magnetic field somehow boosts their brain's ability to mess with a random number machine miles away. What's the underlying idea there? How does that connect to the bigger picture?
Well, the idea, which is explored in some of the broader cosmological and biological implications of Kozyrev's work, touches on something called the anthropic principle.
The anthropic principle. Remind us.
In a nutshell, it suggests that the universe seems to have the specific properties it does, because if it didn't, we wouldn't be here to observe it.
Okay, the universe is fit for us because otherwise we wouldn't see it.
Kind of. In this context, it implies that our existence and our ability to perceive the cosmos are somehow fundamentally intertwined with the universe's history and structure.
So we're not just passive bystanders in the universe, we're actually part of the equation, baked into it somehow.
That's the implication. One of the key arguments in the sources is that our understanding of the universe is incomplete if we only focus on non-living matter. From that perspective, the emergence of life seems like a statistical fluke, something that maybe shouldn't have happened based on the known laws of physics alone.
It's like trying to understand why a painting is beautiful by only analyzing the chemical composition of the paint. You're missing the bigger picture, the artistry.
A very apt analogy, yeah. This has led to theories about a holographic-like informational field surrounding the Earth.
Holographic field.
Yeah. Researchers using ideas from cybernetics, information theory, physics, they've tried to find patterns of intelligence within this field and to understand how humanity might be connected to it.
And this is where the concept of Kozyrev space becomes relevant again, this other realm.
Yes. The idea is that living matter might exist not only in the space-time we're familiar with, Einstein's space-time, but also in this different kind of space, Kozyrev space.
Okay.
The thinking is that this represents a second fundamental phenomenon in nature, alongside our familiar protein nucleic acid-based life, for studying the very essence of life and maybe its intelligent forms.
And these hypomagnetic chambers, the shielded rooms, are seen as a way to access or study this Kozyrev space.
They're considered analogous environments. By shielding living organisms from the Earth's magnetic field, the theory suggests they enter a novel cosmic space, potentially losing some of their biological defenses, their immune protection.
Making them more open?
Perhaps. And becoming more receptive to influences from this Kozyrev space. They might act as channels for the transfer of non-biological, essentially intellectual essence.
Wow.
Interestingly, deep caves, which are influenced by the Earth's natural telluric magnetic fields in a different way, are also seen as natural parallels to these hypomagnetic environments.
So caves could be natural hotspots for psychic Wi-Fi. That's a fun image.
Huh, maybe. They potentially enhance distant visual communication, according to this line of thought.
Okay. And the mirrors themselves, how do they fit into this bigger cosmic picture?
The theory goes even further, proposing that Kozyrev mirrors themselves might act like funnels on Earth, concentrating flows of this intellectual field energy.
Funnels for thought energy.
Sort of. Experimenters using these mirrors might be able to create powerful streams of intellectual energy, opening up possibilities for studying the intellectual time-energy landscape in oceans, deep within the Earth, even in space.
And potentially new communication.
And potentially for developing new ways to communicate with other intelligent worlds. That's part of the speculation.
This is really stretching the boundaries of what we typically consider scientifically possible. What about the nature of life itself in this kind of framework? Is it all just proteins and DNA?
Well, the sources suggest the possibility of field-based forms of life existing in these other spaces, like Kozyrev space.
Life made of fields, not matter. Wow.
That's the idea. And that these field-based life forms might interact with our familiar protein-based life. These interactions, it's speculated, could even cause changes at the atomic level within living cells.
Atomic changes, like what?
Potentially leading to the conversion of isotopes, different forms of the same element. So Studying the isotopic makeup of living matter is proposed as another potential tunnel connecting our conventional reality, Einstein space, and this proposed alternative, Kozyrev space.
So changes in the very atoms within us could be evidence of interaction with these non-physical life forms or influences.
That's one interpretation put forward. There is even a rather speculative idea about a field computer emerging in early humans, proto-hominids.
A field computer?
Yeah, due to cosmic influences and changes in the Earth's magnetic field. This hypothetical computer would involve our brain's neuronal electrical fields integrating into a unified holographic field.
Wow.
Forming the very first spark of intellect and sanity as a phenomenon linked to the entire planet and cosmos.
A cosmic internet of early human brains. That's a wild evolutionary leap.
The hypothesis suggests a subsequent shift from this kind of holographic awareness to the development of verbal communication in human evolution.
Okay, so we swapped the hive mind for language.
Maybe, but it also posits that these underlying field-based forms of unity might still exist, perhaps persist, within smaller cultural or micro-ethnic groups. And tied to this, there's the observation that intellectual activity might sometimes occur with very little or even no measurable electrical activity in the brain, minimal electrophysiological indices.
Thinking without brainwaves? That sounds like pure consciousness in action. Separate from the biology, almost.
It raises some very profound questions, doesn't it, about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to our physical bodies?
Definitely.
Finally, Kozyrev's ideas are linked to the potential for reading event information facts from the past, present, and maybe even the future when the Earth's magnetic field is weakened or altered.
How so?
The idea is the magnetic field normally acts as a kind of filter for a portion of this time flow, if that filter is weakened.
Like in a hypomagnetic chamber or maybe during natural fluctuations?
Exactly. Then the information carried by the time flow could interact more freely with an individual's personal energy field or their field structure. This is hinted at in those hypomagnetic chamber experiments.
Have they actually seen effects in those chambers?
Yes, and indeed, experiments have shown that when humans are in weakened geomagnetic fields, their brain function can be disrupted and their physiological parameters can change. This highlights the potential importance of the Earth's magnetic field for maintaining our normal biological and perhaps energetic structure.
Wow. This whole picture is so interconnected, so cosmic. It's almost overwhelming, but in the most fascinating way possible. And it seems Kozyrev's work also brushes up against other unconventional concepts, like Orgone energy. I've heard that mentioned.
Briefly, yes. The idea of Orgone energy, championed by Wilhelm Reich, proposes a universal life force with some pretty unusual properties, like being weightless, everywhere, constantly in motion. While not a direct part of Kozyrev's core theories, some researchers have noted potential parallels between Orgone and Kozyrev's concept of active time, or maybe the energy associated with his proposed time flow. There are overlaps in the description sometimes.
And then there's organite, this material people make with metal shavings and resin and crystals. Where does that fit into this picture? Is that related?
Orgonite is a more modern idea, really associated with Carl Hans Wells and later popularized by Don Croft. They proposed that this mixture could transform what they called negative energy, or DOR, deadly Orgone radiation, into positive life energy, POR, positive Orgone radiation.
Right, DOR and POR.
People who use Orgonite claim it can influence electromagnetic fields, improve the general mood or moral climate in an area, and even purify water. Again, it's not directly from Kozyrev's work, but it exists within this broader landscape of unconventional energy concepts that sometimes get mentioned alongside his ideas.
Gotcha. And we've also talked quite a bit about hypomagnetic chambers. It sounds like they're a really important tool for exploring these ideas, experimentally at least.
They seem to be, yes. As we discussed, these chambers allow researchers to study the effects of weakened geomagnetic fields on living organisms. The observed changes in brain function and other biological processes in these shielded environments are often cited as evidence for the crucial role the Earth's magnetic field plays in regulating life.
And maybe interacting with time itself.
And possibly in filtering or interacting with the time flow, according to these theories.
And lastly, mirrors themselves, just plain old mirrors, have this long and kind of spooky history beyond just showing our reflection, don't they?
Absolutely. Mirrors have held significant symbolic and practical roles in various esoteric and occult traditions for centuries.
Like scrying.
Exactly. Things like scrying or divination practices. They've been believed to hold and reflect information beyond just visual images. And different shapes of mirrors, like parabolic or spherical ones, with their unique ways of focusing light, have also been explored in these contexts, sometimes linked to the idea of focusing or manipulating subtle energies. So Kozyrev wasn't the first to think mirrors could do more than just reflect light.
Okay, wow. So to try and wrap our heads around this immense cosmic puzzle, we've looked at Kozyrev's initial work as a, respected astronomer.
Right, the lunar volcanism.
Then his radical ideas about time as an active force, with its own density and flow.
Causal mechanics, faster-than-light possibilities.
The intriguing and often, frankly, bizarre experiments with Kozyrev mirrors and their supposed effects on our minds. Psychic abilities.
Altered states, remote viewing claims.
The mind-bending experiments involving distant interactions, twins, RNGs, weird lights in the sky, and their potential implications for the universe.
Non-locality, informational fields.
And we've even touched on related equally strange concepts like Orgon, organite, and the mystical lore of mirrors throughout history.
We have indeed covered a lot of ground. The experimental findings, however unconventional or hard to replicate they might be, and the theoretical frameworks, no matter how strange they might sound at first, they offer a truly unique perspective. It continues to spark debate and inspire further investigation, even if it's on the fringes.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of reality are we actually grasping with our current scientific tools and our everyday senses? It feels like maybe just the tip of the iceberg.
Could be.
If time isn't just a passive backdrop but has these active properties, if it can be influenced by our thoughts, as Kozyrev proposed, then what might be the true extent of our connection to the cosmos and the very fabric of existence? It's a question that really sticks with you long after you stop thinking about burning sugar and wiggling pendulums.
That raises a really important point for you listening in. How do these ideas, as wild as they might seem on the surface, how do they challenge or maybe even expand your own understanding of the fundamental nature of reality?
Yeah, does it resonate? Does it seem completely nuts?
His work undeniably challenges our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. It just opens up these tantalizing possibilities, doesn't it?
It really does. Suggesting new avenues for scientific exploration, offering some incredibly surprising ways the universe might actually be working behind the scenes.
It really makes you wonder about the profound implications if time isn't just a passive stage like we usually think.
But an active participant in the whole cosmic drama.
Yeah.
How might that reshape our understanding of, well, everything? Energy sources powering stars? Maybe the nature of consciousness itself?
The interconnectedness of all things.
In ways we can probably only begin to imagine.
Exactly. It's a thought that really stays with you. So if you found this deep dive into Kozyrev's intriguing and, let's be honest, often perplexing ideas as mind-expanding as we did,
Hope you did.
be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the frontiers of science and unconventional thinking.
And let us know in the comments below what aspects of Kozyrev's work you found most fascinating. Or maybe suggest what other wonderfully weird topics you'd like us to plunge into next time.
Yeah, we always love hearing your thoughts. Thanks for joining us.